The end of each of the most powerful dictators in history, explained in just a few minutes. Men who controlled entire nations, commanded armies, decided who lived and who died. And in the end, almost all of them lost control over the only thing that truly mattered: their own fate. 1. Adolf Hitler. There is no list of dictators without this name. Hitler ruled Germany from 1933 to 1945, and during that time, he was responsible for the death of around 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, and a war that killed between 70 and 85 million people in total. It is the deadliest conflict in human history. In the final months of the war, Hitler no longer left his underground bunker in Berlin. The Soviet army was just a few miles away. His generals knew the end was a matter of days. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler married Eva Braun in a small ceremony inside the bunker. The next day, both of them took their own lives. He with a gunshot to the head, she with cyanide. The bodies were taken to the garden of the Chancellery and burned, following orders Hitler himself had left. He knew what had happened to Mussolini just 2 days earlier and refused to end up the same way. The remains were buried, dug up by the Soviets, buried again, and finally, in 1970, by order of the KGB, the fragments were fully cremated and thrown into a river. The man who promised an empire that would last 1,000 years didn't even last 12, and his body was treated like something that needed to disappear from the face of the earth. 2. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq for almost 25 years. During that time, he fought 2 wars, used chemical weapons against his own people, including the attack on Halabja in 1988, which killed around 5,000 Kurdish civilians in a single day, and ordered the execution of members of his own party that he suspected of disloyalty. There is actually a real video from 1979, right after he took power, where Saddam had a list of names read out loud in a room full of officials. Every name called was taken out of the room. Some were crying. Others tried to shout their loyalty. It didn't matter. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. Saddam disappeared. The most powerful military in the world took 8 months to find him. And when they did, he was inside a hole in the ground on a farmland near Tikrit. The hole had just enough space for one person to lie down. There was a small fan and a bag with $750,000 in cash. The man who built palaces with golden faucets was living in a dirt hole with a portable fan. Saddam was tried by an Iraqi court and sentenced to death by hanging. The execution took place on December 30th, 2006. It was also recorded on a cell phone. In the video, guards shout the name of Muqtada al-Sadr, a religious leader Saddam had persecuted. Saddam responds calmly. Seconds later, the trapdoor opens. The man who ordered hundreds of hangings died the same way, and the video leaked to the entire world in less than 24 hours. 3. Benito Mussolini. Mussolini was the creator of fascism. Not as a figure of speech, he literally invented the term, the movement, and the model of government that others in Europe would later copy. He ruled Italy for over 20 years. In the early days, he was treated like a savior. Crowds chanted his name in the streets. Hitler admired him. Mussolini was, for all purposes, the original model. But the war destroyed everything. In April 1945, with Italy falling apart and the Allies advancing, Mussolini tried to escape to Switzerland, disguised as a German soldier inside a military convoy. He was recognized by Italian fighters at a checkpoint near Lake Como. He was wearing a German coat and a helmet that wasn't his. The disguise didn't work. On April 28th, Mussolini and his partner, Clara Petacci, were shot on a rural road. The bodies were taken to Milan and hung upside down at a gas station in Piazzale Loreto, the very same spot where 1 year earlier, bodies of civilians executed by the fascist regime had been displayed as a warning. The crowd spat on the bodies, kicked them and beat them. Photographs were taken and published in newspapers around the world. The man who invented fascism ended up hanging upside down in the same place where his regime had once displayed the dead. Now, before we talk about the next one, if you're finding this interesting, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and leave a like. That helps YouTube show more videos like this to you, and also helps this content reach more people. With that done, let's keep going. 4. Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi ruled Libya for 42 years. 42. To put that in perspective, when he took power in 1969, the man who would bring him down hadn't even been born yet. He called himself King of Kings of Africa, wore outfits that looked like movie costumes, and walked around with a personal guard made up entirely of armed women. But behind the eccentricity, there was a regime that arrested, tortured, and made people disappear for the simple act of disagreeing. In 2011, during the Arab Spring, the Libyan people rose up. Gaddafi swore he would hunt the rebels, house by house, alley by alley. That's not what happened. In October of that year, he was found hiding inside a concrete drainage pipe on the outskirts of Sirte, his hometown. The man who sat on golden thrones was dragged out of a sewer pipe. What happened in the following minutes was recorded on cell phones by the fighters themselves. Gaddafi begged, "What did I do to you?" He was beaten, dragged on the ground, and killed right there. The body was taken to a meat locker in Misrata, where it was put on display for days. People stood in line to see it. The dictator who ruled for 4 decades ended up in the freezer of a butcher shop. 5. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Nicholas II was the last Tsar of Russia. He ruled an empire that stretched from Europe to the Pacific, the largest country in the world. But he was also the Tsar who lost a war against Japan, dragged Russia into World War I without preparation, and ignored decades of hunger and unrest while living in one of the most luxurious palaces in Europe. In 1917, the revolution broke out. Nicholas gave up the throne in March. He and his entire family, his wife, 4 daughters, and his 13-year-old son were kept as prisoners, first in a palace, then in a house in Yekaterinburg. In the early hours of July 17, 1918, the family was woken up and taken to the basement. They were told they were being moved. When they reached the basement, a firing squad was waiting. Everyone was shot: Nicholas, his wife, all 5 children, the family doctor, and 3 servants. The youngest was 13. The daughters didn't die right away because they had jewels sewn inside their clothes, which worked like a kind of makeshift bulletproof vest. They were then killed with bayonets and shots at close range. The bodies were taken to a forest, burned with acid, and buried in separate graves to make identification harder. They were only found in 1991. In the year 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church declared the entire family as saints. The last Tsar of Russia and his entire family were executed in a basement, with no trial, no sentence. And the same country that killed them declared them saints 82 years later. 6. Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet took power in Chile in 1973 through a military coup against President Salvador Allende. The presidential palace, La Moneda, was bombed by Chile's own air force. Allende died that day, What came after were 17 years of military dictatorship. It is estimated that more than 3,000 people were killed or disappeared under his regime. Over 40,000 were imprisoned and tortured. In 1998, during a medical trip to London, Pinochet was arrested under orders from Spanish judge Baltasar Garzón, who sought to try him for crimes against Spanish citizens during the dictatorship. The world was stunned. A former dictator arrested in one country on the orders of a judge from a third country. After 503 days of house arrest in London, Pinochet was released on health grounds and returned to Chile. When he stepped off the plane, he stood up from his wheelchair and waved to his supporters. The image went around the world. Back in Chile, he faced over 300 legal cases, but he was always declared unfit for trial due to health issues. He died on December 10th, 2006, at the age of 91, at the military hospital in Santiago, International Human Rights Day. He was never convicted. The dictator who overthrew a democratic government ruled for nearly 2 decades and ordered the killing of thousands of people died at 91 of old age without ever hearing a guilty verdict. 6 dictators in total. 6 men who held absolute power over millions of people. None of them kept what they built. None of them died with the power they once had. What this list shows isn't just history, it's a pattern. Absolute power doesn't protect anyone forever, and the ending is almost never chosen by the one in charge. If this video showed you something you didn't know, it deserves to reach more people. Share it with someone who loves history. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Help this kind of content grow. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.